So to do this, we've invited along some people involved in the Pacific Quality Infrastructure Initiative and the Pacific Island Standards Committee to talk about what's happening under the Technical Committee on Kava, which I think everyone will be aware of and some of you involved in directly. So I'll introduce them shortly. They're all online, but firstly, I just wanted to recount, I guess, briefly the recent history with the Kava standard and the methods in particular, and the back and forth sort of that's occurred between CCNASWP and CCMAS. So bear with me. It's going to be a little bit dry, but it's but I think necessary maybe just to remind us all, because a lot has happened, and as I say, I've tried my best to condense it down in a simple way that makes sense to me, at least. So if it's not right, I've got certainly Fiji, who's been heavily involved in this, to jump in and correct him. So with that said, so how we got to where we are now. So the regional standard for Kava products for use as a beverage when mixed with water, that was considered at step 4 at CCNASWP 15 in September 2019. At that meeting, it was agreed to forward the standard for adoption at step 5, with the possibility that if some outstanding issues could be resolved before the next CC exec and commission meeting, that the regional coordinator could recommend skipping steps 6 and 7 and adopting at steps 5, 8. And that's what happened at CAC 43 in November 2020. It was through that process from CCNASWP 15 to CAC 43 in November 2020 that we landed on the quality parameter in the standard that states Kava products shall be of known noble varieties based on meeting the criteria of absorbance of acetonic extracts less than or equal to 0.9 absorbance units and with suitable total Kava lactone. So that was the parameter or the specification that we ended up with in the standard. Standard was published without any methods of analysis and sampling, noting that they would be in the CCMAS standard CXS 234. So that's usual practice for commodity standards because the methods hadn't yet been sent for endorsement to CCMAS. So the standards published and approved, and later on the methods would be sent to CCMAS for endorsement, and then inclusion in that CXS 234, which is the central repository for all methods. So methods were sent to CCMAS in 2021. The methods that had been worked through at that previous CCNASWP meeting, but they weren't all endorsed due to a couple of issues. So the methods were provided for 3 provisions. So one was for noble Kava varieties using HPTLC and or UV calorimetry absorbance of acetonic extracts, a method for moisture, and also a method for flavor carbanes. Similarly, HPTLC or UV absorbance of acetonic extracts. CCNAS endorsed the methods for moisture, but they and they're contained in CXS 234, but they didn't endorse the methods for carbolactones or flavocarbanes, because they said there needed to be more clarity about how the method was to be used, and to include a clear procedure for determining compliance with the standards. So they asked that CCNASWP produce a stepwise SOP for the methods that will be used for each of the provisions in the standard. And they asked a couple of questions, like what constitutes suitable total carbolactone. There was no provision for flavocarbanes, so maybe there didn't need to be a method for that. So following that, an SOP for carbolactones and flavocarbanes was developed for CCNASWP 16 in February 2023. The SOP was for an HPTLC and a UHPTLC, or ultra high performance thin layer chromatography. CCNASWP 16 looked at that draft SOP and made some revisions in that session, and then agreed to send those on to CCNAS for endorsement. Noting that the revised method was just for the HPTLC. At that point, the SOP didn't address the use of UV calorimetry. It had just moved to the HPTLC. CCNAS looked at that. It didn't endorse the method, didn't endorse the SOP, because there wasn't a description of how the final determination would be made. So, as in once you've performed the HPTLC and made the observations, how do you decide if the Kava varieties are noble and if there are suitable carbolactones? So CCNAS asked CCNASWP to take another look and provide those edits to address the absence of an instruction on the final determination. And then the issue was discussed again at CCNASWP 17, the last meeting. And at that meeting, an SOP for UV calorimetry was presented, which we looked at. An SOP for HPTLC initially wasn't, but then one was worked on at the meeting and included in the meeting via a CRD. So both were looked at. At that point, at that meeting anyway, we didn't reach agreement about which method should be pursued. And some of the key considerations that were noted at the time, or that played into that consideration, was that the UV calorimetry being used in isolation had some shortcomings potentially, in that based on the literature, if we were to use that calorimetry absorbance at 440 nanometers and the criteria of less than 0.9 absorbance, that we would include some of the non-noble varieties, and so perhaps wouldn't be able to discern accurately enough, and that there were ways that the test could be, the parameters could be amended so that it could correlate better with noble varieties, but in doing that would then also exclude a bunch of noble product, so that wouldn't be suitable from a trade perspective. If 40% of the results were saying that it was non-noble, but they were actually noble. On the HPTLC side of things, I think it was discussed that would be potentially able to more accurately discern nobility without causing those issues. But validation of the method with a decision point or a specification on nobility would be required, or we'd need to agree what that was. It was also discussed that there was the potential for that kind of test to be used as a verification test in conjunction with the UV absorbance being used as a screening test in the field. So a combined approach may be the way forward. So CCNASWP 17 agreed to do a little bit more work out of session to try and come to an agreement on that. It tasked the coordinator with working with members in the NASWP region to try and refine the draft SOP on an HPTLC method and or a UV calorimetry method that could then be sent to CCMAS, with a view to sending that last year, but that was a very short time frame and probably wasn't really going to allow the time for consultation and to ensure that all members were on board with that approach. So I think basically to summarize that, we're sort of still left in a situation where we, I guess, need a collective decision on what the specification is for nobility and how that should be measured. So that's kind of the history of how we got to here. And then I think kind of where to from now. So that's the point of today is really to check in on where the thinking is at in the region on specification and method finalization for the Codex Kava standard, noting that we ideally would be in a position at the next CCNASWP early next year to be able to recommend a method to go to CCMAS for endorsement and finalize things. So today, dialing in online, as I said, we've got a number of people to discuss the Technical Committee 3 on Kava, which is being convened under the Pacific Quality Infrastructure Initiative and the Pacific Island Standards Committee. And as I said, some of the people in this room, I think, are on TC3 and will be engaging directly in that. And others in the room will be in close contact, I'm sure, with people in their country who are on TC3. So really the idea is to get an overview of the initiative for those of us who aren't as across the details, hear about where things are up to and what the work plan and next steps are, and what the outputs should be. So I think really would just be good to hear thoughts in the room about whether this does provide a useful avenue for trying to develop and validate a method that could be discussed at CCNASWP 18 and submitted for endorsement to CCMAS, and kind of leverage this work that's happening in TC3. So that's the purpose. If there are any questions, please hop in. Otherwise I'll throw to our guests online. Fiji, are you comfortable with that potted history that I've given there? Yeah. So online, I'll just give you a quick introduction of the speakers we have. So we've got Caroline Honour from the Multilateral Economic Cooperation section at the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. We also have Alok Jain at the Pacific Regional. He's a Pacific Regional Quality Infrastructure Coordinator at the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. We also have Stan Stanilov, the International Engagement Manager from Standards Australia, and we have Bernard Martin, who's a Technical Development Officer at the Analytical Services Branch at the National Measurement Institute of Australia. So we'll hear from them, and then we'll open up to the floor for a discussion and questions. So first of all, then I'll throw to Caroline Honour from DFAT. Caroline manages investments with the World Bank, the PIF Secretariat's Geneva office, and UNCTAD, with a focus on trade facilitation and digital trade in the Pacific. Caroline previously managed PACER Plus and private sector development, including Australia's Kava pilot, when working in the Office of the Pacific's Regional Trade and Private Sector section. Over to you, Caroline, if you're online.
Thanks, and thank you everyone for having me today. Firstly, I would just like to acknowledge that I am meeting you today from Ngunnawal country in Canberra, and I'd just like to acknowledge and pay my respects to their elders. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in Sydney in a couple of weeks, and it's nice to be back in this Kava territory, although I have to say sincere apologies, that last briefing was very technical and did mostly go over my head. I tried my best to follow. In terms of Australia's involvement, Australia recognises Kava's importance to the Pacific identity and to the growing Pacific diaspora in Australia, and its role in strengthening people-to-people connections across our region. And we continue to partner with growers and processors to support a resilient and sustainable Pacific Kava market system. We proudly support regional work on Kava standards, biosecurity and market development, which we have done through the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat and long-standing development programs. These partnerships enabled the commercial import pilot and will help secure the long-term future of the global Kava market. The DFAT and New Zealand's MFAT supported Farmer program and its successor, the Farmer Plus program, have strengthened the Pacific Kava sector by developing quality standards in Fiji, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu and Tonga, and production manuals, by training farmers, supporting plant health management and improving supply chains, helping Pacific Kava meet export market requirements and expand internationally. Under PACER Plus, the PACER Plus implementation unit developed a toolkit for the Vanuatu Kava sector to support the industry's use of e-commerce, improve its competitiveness and increase trade. DFAT and New Zealand MFAT's market development facility has strengthened the Pacific Kava industry by partnering with exporters and processors to expand international markets, improve processing and quality standards, build reliable supply chains, and increase incomes for smallholder farmers. At our end in Australia, Pacific Trade Invest has played an important role promoting Pacific Kava in international markets, supporting exporters, and helping strengthen commercial pathways for high-quality, standards-compliant Kava products. Multiple Pacific exporters have been featured in PTI's Pacific Showcase Pavilion at the Fine Food Australia Trade Exhibition, including Fiji Kava in 2023, Green Gold Kava in 2023, and PNG Kava in 2025. Our work on Kava standards sits within a wider regional effort to build a safe, sustainable and resilient Pacific Kava market system. It aims to strengthen product quality, biosecurity, governance and market development across the full value chain. Facilitating access to the Australian market remains a priority, and our decision to continue commercial imports beyond the pilot reflects our commitment to a safe, sustainable and ongoing trade. DFAT continues to engage with federal, state and territory agencies on our domestic Kava settings. In doing this, we are mindful of the need to balance public health and safety with continued trade opportunities and preserve the positive image of Pacific Kava. I'm going to leave it there. I wanted to keep it fairly short, but happy to take questions if anyone's got any.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I think we'll move through and hold questions till the end if that's okay. So next up, we have Alok Jain from the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat talking about his role as the Pacific Regional Quality Infrastructure Coordinator. Thank you, Alok.
Thank you very much, Scott. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Can you please give me the access to share my screen, please?
We're sharing your slides if that's helpful.
Can I share it, please, if you don't mind? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. Thank you once again. Alok Jain from PIPS. I'm really pleased to share an overview of the Pacific Quality Infrastructure Framework under Pacific Island Forum Secretariat. And my focus will be how PQI plays a key role in supporting and advancing regional Kava initiative. In 2020, Pacific Quality Infrastructure Initiative was established and endorsed by Forum Trade Ministers. And at that time, a midterm plan was also approved. The whole PQA initiative sits under the deepening forum market thematic area when we talk about the Pacific Aid for Trade strategy and the resource and economic development thematic area of 2050 strategic for the Blue Pacific continent implementation plan. Pacific quality infrastructure addresses the need of all the three components: metrology, standardization, and conformity assessment. And the objective is very clear. It has to strengthen regional cooperations and support harmonized approach to facilitate trade. So we have three committees in each pillar, like one for the metrology, Pacific Island Metrology Committee. Then we have Pacific Island Standards Committee and Pacific Island Testing Committees. And these committee members are from the 18 Pacific Island Forum member countries. It's phase 3 of PKO initiative under PIFS, and we are working very closely with the implementation partner, the pioneer organizations in the field of standards, metrology, conformity assessment, accreditation. Specifically to Pacific Island Standards Committee, which was established in 2020, April 2020, and immediately after that, there were two technical committees which were constituted, TC1 and TC2. The technical committee 1 was on the building and construction. Technical committee 2 was on food and food products. And till now, we have already concluded 13 meetings for each technical committee. I would like to emphasize on technical committee 2, which is, on the quick frozen cassava standard. And it has made a great milestone recently with its conclusion of public comment stage. And we received over 50 comments. This shows the region's excitement and investment in the very first Pacific region standards. The committee is now at a balloting stage to a vote on the comments received. After this stage, the first standard will be ready for publication. The other very, very important milestone was in 2025 when the Pacific Island Standards Committee was endorsed by Forum Trade Ministers as the Pacific Regional Standard Body. So this is a real milestone that today PISC is a Pacific Regional Standard Body endorsed by the Forum Trade Ministers. And when we talk about Kava, the Kava task started last year, and now we have a technical committee on Kava, and the inaugural meeting is going to be held in Sydney next month. So this is the progress made in the regional standard domain. So in meteorology also we have, as I said, that we have Pacific Island Meteorology Committee. We are providing equipment, we are providing training, because that's a backbone of any other pillars of the quality infrastructure. And very recently, a draft meteorology law was formed to be adopted by the different Pacific Island members. Testing is another very, very important component. Even when we establish these standards, the next challenge is to have the conformity assessment bodies in place. So we have already working on at least developing two Pacific Island reference laboratories. Then we have a plan to assist the accreditation journey of selected level 2 laboratories. Level 2 laboratories are those laboratories which have some sort of quality management system in place. And of course, we need to enhance the capacity and capability of the level 3 laboratories. So important point here to mention is the PT program which was conducted in the region. Indeed, two PT program has been conducted in the region, and the recommendation of both the PT program as an outcome is to have the harmonized standard, harmonized method for Kava testing. So that supports our work of PISC Technical Committee 3. So the PISC TC3 on Kava directly respond to regional Kava development strategy as well, in aligning and harmonizing the regional policies and rules on Kava quality standards. TC3 work completely. It works in hand with the Forum Kava working group by providing the technical standard setting pathway while remaining aligned with the wider policy and sector discussions. So PIFS as a whole plays a central coordination role across all the PQI streams, standard, metrology, and conformity assessment. Overall, TC3 Kava, the technical committee which is formed under PISC, is within the established regional architect and is already endorsed by and supported by the Pacific Forum ministers and Pacific government. So thank you very much. We are, as I said, we are in the third phase of the PQI, but so far so good, and we are looking forward and hope to have very impactful, hope to have a very impact on supporting economic growth, trust in trade, alignment with the global standards. So I stop here. Thank you very much for giving an opportunity. If any questions, I'm ready to take it up. Thank you very much, Scott and team.
Stan. So next up, Stan Stanilov, if we have you online, from Standards Australia, please welcome, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott. Can you hear me okay?
We certainly can.
Excellent. And you can see my video as well?
We will in a minute, maybe. Hold on.
Okay. All right. That's quite all right. I'll just carry on in the interest of time. Bulavinaka to the hosts and everyone in attendance. Thank you very much. My name is Stan Stanilov. As Scott mentioned, it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm a team member with Standards Australia in my substantive role here as a manager for TC3 Kava committee on the PISC. And as Alok mentioned, this is an initiative under the Pacific Island Standards Committee and the broader PQI in the region. This project was really born
I think we've lost sound. I think.
All right. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. As I mentioned, the regional Kava standard initiative was first discussed over the last few years at the PISC level by technical experts and regional stakeholders in the region as an area of critical importance to be addressed through the means of internationally aligned standardization. Perhaps next slide, Simon, if I may. Everyone in the room is fully understanding of the importance that Kava plays for the Pacific region, especially culturally as a cultural staple and heritage, but also the economic footprint that has been realized over the last few years has been quite significant, exponential, one might say, which is incredibly important for the region. With those types of growth for any area, really, economic area, there come the risks and pitfalls at times that can expose the lack of sufficient soft infrastructure, it being standardization, accreditation, and certification, guarding a good performance in any economic area. And so for next slide, Simon, please. This presents certainly a range of risks for the Pacific Kava sector that range from purely regionally based to essentially risk of not fully realizing the potential of global growth and promotion of the Pacific, essentially product and culture globally. And so there is a number of different level sectors, risks that have been described here. And so the Pacific Regional Kava Standard was essentially an initiative that was kicked off in 2025. It was sort of in response to the Regional Pacific Kava Strategy that was published by the Island Forum. And one of the key priorities under the strategy was to harmonize and integrate more national differences in the region and to essentially streamline a little bit more the areas that are required to support Kava through standardization, standardized methods for technical specification, but also on the regulatory and compliance and testing in particularly aspects of it all. So next slide, please. What is important to highlight really for this project is that the key focus of it is that this would be is designed to be a Pacific-led project, something that is designed by Pacific stakeholders, a wide range of stakeholders, including private sector, regulatory and compliance and testing, as well as research and academic voices, to really truly reflect the importance and the different nuances of Kava across the Pacific region. And so very rewardingly, last year, this project was co-sponsored by 4 of the key Kava producing nations in the Pacific. Fiji, Tonga, Vanuatu, and Samoa put together a project proposal that was presented at PISC, the Pacific Island Standards Committee, and that project proposal was approved in the PISC's 12th meeting in Fiji last year in May. And so since then, in our capacity role in Standards Australian supporting PIFS, the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, we've taken steps to essentially start to formalize a technical committee under the PISC, which is TC3, which is now a reality. And it's very rewarding to see the response, the overwhelmingly supportive response that has been expressed for this initiative. One example is out of 18 Island Forum members, we have at the moment 11 of those are represented through technical expertise on TC3. So truly, again, a reflection of a Pacific-led, Pacific-focused project to essentially put together a minimum performance indicators for Kava for the full life cycle of Kava, from sustainable agricultural cultivation through to export and distribution, labeling, sustainable practices, the full life cycle essentially for Kava. A big difference maker for this project also is the fact that there is provision also for the design of a pilot testing scheme to be put in place. Therefore, not just leaving a standard as a voluntary instrument, but also having the necessary conversations at the technical level of what a pilot testing and compliance scheme could look like for the region. That would also have an impact on the long-term resource and capacity building of the testing capability of the Pacific region as well. And so that in concert with other technical aspects of Kava standardization will definitely contribute to the growth and the safe and the quality of cultivation and distribution and global export of Pacific Kava to the global market. Next slide, please, Simon. And so key element of designing the committee for this particular project was really to establish the scope, very importantly, and also what is outside of scope for this particular initiative. Some of the key highlights, of course, focus on the names and varieties and definitions for nobility as well. Very important aspect is what Scott mentioned in his opening remarks on the testing side of things, where testing methodology would be discussed. The project seeks to have a very good mapping of where testing capability exists, and very importantly, where there are gaps in the region as well, because it's very well recognized that there are those testing gaps that exist that essentially present a bit of a barrier for the Pacific region to fully realize its capability in quality production. So that would also be part of this committee's work to go through all of those elements and discuss at a consensus-based, open and transparent platform in following with international standardization practices. And this is where Standards Australia is working very closely with in supporting PIFs and making sure that that environment is there, both from a committee methods of work, but also from standardization methodologies that the Talanoa is really inclusive of all those voices and reflective of the needs of different Pacific Island nations. Implementing the good practices from the start through to production, distribution, labeling, storage, traceability, all of those elements that are important to maintain the quality of Pacific Kava. And also there will be, as I mentioned, conversations about the testing and certification aspects, because those are the areas that traditionally to this date regulators are struggling in the region to ensure that technical guidelines are indeed able to respond to those regulatory aspects for maintaining quality. Next slide. Thank you, Simon. And I will just conclude this with just giving you a bit of an overview of the timings for this project. So as I mentioned, it started in 2025. Quite a bit of wide-ranging consultations with virtually most, if not all, of the Pacific Island Forum members to ensure that this is truly a Pacific-led and supported and endorsed project. The proposal was submitted and approved at PISC level in May of 2025. There was quite a bit of coordination and support work that we provided the PIFs in establishing the TC3 committee. There was an extensive consultation and nomination process that was held late in 2025. And pleased to confirm that on March 9, TC3 was formally endorsed by PISC. And since then, basically the focus has been on leading the inaugural committee meeting, which will be held during the week of April 20th through 23rd in Sydney. And then all of the consequent meetings of TC3 will be held in the Pacific region itself, so that it allows for maximum exposure and promotion of the good work that the committee will be doing. And then the plan is for a draft technical guideline/standard to be worked on by the committee for the rest of 26, and by the end of 26 for the committee to have developed a draft document that can be taken out for public consultation, be open for comments to the Pacific region, essentially. So that's where we stand at the moment. As I said, the focus is on TC3's first committee meeting in Sydney in a couple weeks' time, 2-3 weeks' time. And we're excited to welcome all of those committee members, both in person and virtually, and to essentially start this critical work and to work in conjunction with other parallel initiatives like the Forum Kava Working Group, as Alok mentioned, and the work that they've been doing on market access and GI, as well as the work that Codex has led for a long time, and collaborating with that group to ensure that those efforts to support Kava ultimately are complementary one of each other. So I'll just stop it here, but thank you very much for your attention again, and I'll be happy to take questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stan, for taking us through TC3. To, I suppose, drill down a little bit further on the methods side of TC3, we've invited along Bernard Martin from the National Measurement Institute of Australia, who's been doing some work in conjunction with this initiative, looking at methods for determining nobility, as I understand it. So if I can invite Bernard to give an overview of what's happened there. Thank you.
Hi there. I've just sent in a request to share my screen.
Sorry. My bad. Mr. Bernard, please take the floor.
Is my audio working?
Yes. It is. We can hear you. Thank you.
Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
Perhaps it's making its way. I'll let you know as soon as we can. Sorry. You can be sharing. Yes. So yeah. Are you sharing your screen?
I sent it, put in a request for it. One moment. Yeah, now it's working.
Excellent.
Okay, can you see the presentation slide now?
No.
Oh. Try again. Okay, that's working now.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
It's okay. We can see. Thank you.
So as Scott mentioned, I'm Martin Bernard. I'm one of the technical development officers at the Analytical Services branch at the National Measurement Institute of Australia. I was asked to do this presentation as a brief overview of ultraviolet visible spectroscopy and liquid chromatography and how these techniques are used to analyze the chemical composition of kava for the purpose of variety identification and quality assessment. So the physiological effects of kava are primarily determined by its kava lactone and flavocavane composition. All kava varieties contain 6 key kava lactones and 3 flavocavanes. High-quality noble kava varieties are typically characterized by higher levels of carvane, methysticin, and dihydrocarvane, together with low flavocavane content. In contrast, non-noble varieties are often characterized by increased levels of dihydromethysticin and flavocavanes, which have often been associated with undesirable physiological effects. Of particular concern is flavocavane B, which has been linked to liver toxicity. Adverse effects of these compounds may also be exacerbated by poor harvesting processes and processing practices, especially when aerial plant parts containing larger amounts of the flavocavanes are included rather than the peeled roots. While flavocavanes are present in all varieties of kava, they are poorly soluble in water, meaning traditional aqueous preparations tend to limit their extraction, contributing to the historically safe consumption of noble kava. Sorry, one moment. The 6 kava lactones common to all kava varieties can be used to assess the nobility and quality of both raw materials and finished products through chemotyping, a method commonly used to distinguish plant varieties. Each kava lactone is assigned a number from 1 to 6. Its concentration is then measured accurately and precisely, and the compounds are then arranged in descending order of concentration to define the plant's chemotype. It is important to note that the chemotype of noble kava varieties may vary depending on region of production. Chemotyping is directly correlated with kava variety. Shown here are the chemotyping results for 176 samples encompassing noble, 2-day, and Wickmani varieties. These results demonstrate that each variety can be systematically grouped according to its chemotype. Reliable chemotyping depends on precise and accurate quantification of each of the individual kava lactones, which can be achieved using liquid chromatography combined with ultraviolet visible spectroscopy. Ultraviolet visible spectroscopy is a technique used to study how matter interacts with light. In this context, light refers to a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, encompassing the visible region which we can see and the ultraviolet region, which lies just beyond the human vision. Light can be described as a wave, similar to a vibration such as sound. As a wave, it is characterized by both wavelength and a frequency. These two properties are inversely related. At the lower energy end of the visible spectrum, light has longer wavelengths and lower frequencies, producing red and yellow colors. As the wavelength decreases and the frequency increases, the colors progress through green and blue beyond the visible region, and at even higher frequencies, it enters the ultraviolet region. As an example, consider the visible absorption spectra of 2 dyes, Congo red and methylene blue. In the spectrum of Congo red, absorption occurs primarily in the blue region of the visible light spectrum. When blue light is absorbed, our brain interprets the absence of blue as being red, causing the dye to appear red. In contrast, methylene blue absorbs light in the red region of the visible spectrum. The absence of red light is then interpreted by our brains as being blue, and the dye therefore appears blue. In a typical UV spectrometer, light from a source that emits a broad range of wavelengths is directed through a device known as a monochromator. The monochromator separates the light into its individual wavelengths and allows a selected wavelength to pass through the sample. As the light passes through the sample, some of it is absorbed by the dissolved analyte. A photovoltaic detector then measures the amount of light being transmitted and compares it to the intensity of light from the original source. The amount of light absorbed is reported as a fractional percentage, which is directly related to the concentration of the absorbing compound. As some of you may be familiar with, when Kava is extracted into a solvent such as acetone, it can produce a highly colored solution. This color arises from the chemical constituents present in the extract, including the Kava lactones and flavocarvanes. In this interaction between the chemical composition and light absorption, this is what underpins the ultraviolet visible spectroscopy in Kava analysis. Here in the laboratory at NMI, we have access to individual pure standards of each of the Kava lactones and flavocarvanes. In these images, we can see the compounds methysticin, dihydromethysticin, carvane, and dihydrocarvane. These compounds produce no visible color. This is because these compounds absorb light primarily in the ultraviolet region of the spectrum, and therefore neither absorb nor reflect light in the visible range. We can see the UV visible spectrum of carvane shown at the bottom of the spectrum, bottom of the slide. Here we have yangonin and desmethoxyangonin. Both compounds begin to absorb light in the violet region of the visible spectrum. At low concentrations, this absorption is weak and the color is difficult to observe. At higher concentrations, absorption extends further into the violet region of the spectrum, making the color more apparent. The absorption of violet light results in the absence of violet reaching the eye, which our brains interpret as yellow in appearance. This contributes to the yellow appearance of Kava extracts. Finally, we have here the compounds flavocarvanes A, B, and C, from which we can see that they are highly colored even at low concentrations. This is because flavocarvanes absorb more violet light than yangonin and desmethoxyangonin. As the concentrations of flavocarvanes increases, absorption extends further into the blue and green regions of the visible spectrum. This increase in absorption causes the solutions to begin to appear orange in some Kava extracts and even deep red. When the UV visible spectra of all Kava lactones and flavocarvanes are overlaid, we observe that yangonin, desmethoxyangonin, dihydromethysticin, and all the flavocarvanes absorb light within the same region of the ultraviolet and visible spectrums, overlapping significantly in the region 400 to 450 nanometers. Some of these compounds, which can be associated with noble varieties, absorb violet and blue light, producing the yellow and orange to dark red extracts. Yangonin and desmethoxyangonin, which can occur in high concentrations in noble varieties, can absorb in this same region, leading to visual misclassification. This means that color and UV visible spectrometric methods alone are not sufficiently selective enough for identification of Kava varieties. Colorimetric techniques like this may be suitable for domestic or preliminary screening purposes. However, they lack specificity required for definitive varietal classification. For regulatory importation purposes, more selective analytical approaches are required. Techniques that can achieve chemotyping when combined with liquid chromatography provide reliable identification and quantification. So this is why we couple it with a technique such as chromatography. Chromatography is a process used to separate mixtures into their individual components. In this example, chromatography is used to separate the different dyes present in inks. As the solvent at the bottom of the paper is absorbed and moves up the paper, it carries the dye with it. The different dyes begin to separate because they differ in their solubility in the solvent and how strongly they interact with the paper. As a result, each dye travels at a different speed, resulting in them separating from the solvent as well as one another. Liquid chromatography is the evolution of this technique, which is able to separate complex mixtures such as kava extracts. A liquid solvent, known as a mobile phase, carries the sample through the column packed with a solid material, called a stationary phase. As the sample moves through the column, different compounds interact with the stationary phase to different extents. Because of these different interactions, each compound travels through the column at a different speed and exits the column at a different time. This process allows for the individual components of a mixture to be separated from one another before detection. When we apply this technique to a kava extract, this is the result we get. Shown here is a kava extract that has been passed through a liquid chromatograph and detected by UV visible spectroscopy. On the left-hand side of the graph here, we have the UV visible spectrum, and on the bottom scale, we have time, in which we can see the separation of all 9 components present in kava extracts. If we take a cross-section at a particular wavelength, we get this, which is the separation profile for the kava extract. Each of these peaks can be used to accurately quantify the concentration of each individual component in the kava extract. And this is the advantage of HPLC UV visible spectroscopy. This separation allows for high sensitivity and high selectivity for kava lactones, as well as the flavocarvanes. It is quantitatively accurate as well as cost-effective and easy to maintain, compared to some systems which rely on mass spectrometry. It supports chemotyping as well as the flavocarvane content, total kava lactone content, and carvane to dihydroxymethysticin ratio. It is a widely accepted technique for ensuring compliance with regulatory imports for the quality and safety of therapeutic goods. And just lastly, I'll add here, there are HPLC UV Vis is used in a lot of therapeutic goods currently, accepted by the European Pharmacopoeia as well as the United States Pharmacopoeia. Some of these include valerian root, ginkgo leaf, and a few other botanical herbal medicines that you can see there. And that's all I have.
And so, thank you to all the presenters online. I will hand over to Sam in a second to facilitate discussion, if that's okay. But I guess just from my perspective, like the overarching question for me is, there's this quality initiative going on across the region, which has good political buy-in and interest from across the different regions, and industry engagement, I understand, and that it will be looking at developing a standard which will be looking at the specification and methods for nobility. So do we think that we can align what we're trying to achieve in Codex for NASWP 18? Can we align it with the activities that are happening in this initiative, or at least leverage the outputs of those? So interested to think about it through that lens anyway, from my perspective. Thank you.
No, that's okay. Well, thank you very much, Scott, and thank you to all colleagues who contributed with their experience, their knowledge, and also with an update on what is happening within the context of this Pacific initiative. I guess maybe before delving into the discussion and charting a path forward, I would like to see if there are any questions to what was presented or any comments for that matter. Yes, Jeremiah.
Thank you, colleagues online, for your presentation, and especially with the last one. It has been a while since we've been working on this method, and I think probably from last year we've been talking a few of us on a particular method, and we knew that there was a limitation or challenges with the current Codex method that we were trying to make, because we couldn't get to the determination of the final determination properly through a proper validation. I'm happy to say that we've also been working on a similar HPLC UV, but we thought, so the question I think across this room is then how are we going to address this at CCNASWP, because obviously the text will change, and we've seen that also Kava chemotyping is one of reliable lengths to complement not only the concentration of leptons, because of the relationship between the quality markers of flavonoids and Kava leptons. And what has just been presented clearly gives a clear indication on what are the steps that will be taken by CCMAS for us to produce within the next 12 months. A method that can be adopted too for the rest of the region, which in terms of costing and how suitable and easy for it to be used, apart from the calorimetry. So I believe, just a comment, I think in the method section, we need to say a pass and a fail test, which we then use a confirmatory of HPLC to support. I guess it's the right direction for us. I leave to the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment, Jeremiah. Any other questions or comments? Yes, our colleague here.
Thank you to our online colleagues for the presentation, especially the last one. So back in Samoa, we do analyze Kava using HPLC. So my question is, what I'm trying to ask, if we are in the same test method in the way that we analyze these 6 chemotypes, because from what I know, is it possible to all the 6 chemotypes to be available in the Kava? Because there were one time we received a sample from Tomo, there was only 3 chemotypes. So my question is, if we doing the same process as them, maybe they could help us with this, with the method as well. And I was wondering the column that you guys use. I'm talking about the technical side of it. So if Osama will be appreciated to get help from them and advice or SOP according to the platform using the HPLC. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So I think I will turn to our colleagues online. If any one of you would like to address even a starting point of the answer, knowing that I think there is a request to share the information and the experience, which essentially we can reiterate to you. So please, I don't know who from colleagues would like to address the question.
That audience microphone is a little bit soft in the audio. Are you able to just repeat it for us, please?
Well, I will attempt to paraphrase it, and I'm going to ask actually just to make sure that what I'm saying is right. So apparently there is a method that is being followed in Tonga, in Samoa. And essentially the method is getting 3 compounds out of the 6 that are identified, And basically, she's asking also about the analytical method, some specificities about the analytical method, the type of column that might be used, I guess the mobile phase, which essentially we will ask you to share if at all possible.
Yep, certainly. So the goal of developing this method is producing a simple HPLC UV visible method that can be applied in most labs. You saw my chromatogram there that had all 9 compounds. So that's using a basic liquid chromatography column. So it's not even like a lot of the newer instruments and things have ultra high performance columns, which they don't work with older pumps. They only work with newer machines. The mobile phase I use is methanol and water with acetic acid in it, which is vinegar. So it took a little bit of development to get the mobile phase and grade the settings on the instrument right to get those 9 compounds to separate in a reasonable time. But yeah, it is very achievable with most simple HPLC instruments with UV visible detectors. It does require reference materials though, so you do need a reference standard.
Okay, and I guess maybe we'll ask you to share, unless actually the information is published somewhere, that you can direct us to the publication, but if you are open to sharing the technical details of the method.
The goal is to share it more when there's a standard decided.
Once it's
developing.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've developed it, but not validated it to the level of being accredited by the regulatory bodies. So once it's we'll undertake the time to validate it once we know it's necessary to start providing it to the region.
Okay, thank you for that. There's another question from our colleague from Tonga.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Don't hear me. Thank you for the presentation, and I acknowledge the work that have been done on trying to help the Pacific with analysis the Kava sample. I guess from Tonga, this is probably just a comment. I'm not going to be saying any question, but the comment is that I acknowledge the UV method as a preliminary, and also speaking from the Pacific perspective, and with using of HPLC, it could be very expensive in terms of considering the consumable side of. But I'm thinking on using spectral to include the UV spectroscopy in the standard, so that it facilitates, I guess, as we have seen that you can really tell the difference between the noble and the non-noble varieties as a preliminary test, and if there is any needs for HPLC, then we can go ahead with it. But I think that's from a Tongan perspective, is that we would highly support to include UV spectroscopy as a preliminary, and then if HPLC is necessary, then I hope my comments is going through.
Did you get the comment, colleagues? If you have any feedback?
I'm just saying my comment based on my understanding.
On the understanding, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to attempt actually to, if there are no other comments or there are others. Okay, please.
Thank you to the colleagues that have presented it. I just have 2 very simple questions. From regulatory perspective, how does the standard will complement the regional Codex? and what is the how is this going to align to the respective countries' regulatory standards, knowing that most align and generate their regulation of Codex, and now we have come to this platform in the region. How does this works? Because for me as a regulator right now, I'm really confused how this is going to work with from the PIF side, and then we have our own regulation, and then we having the regulation, the regional standards, and then we having the aligning our standard with the regional standard on Codex. And so how do we work complementing and helping each other so everyone is clear on their role in the Pacific? Otherwise, like Professor said, we just don't make standards for the purpose of there should be a question why and should that we don't have the resources in the Pacific. People, the machines like HPLC is quite costly. So how do we really, that's a question we really need to ask in this forum as a region. We have one line running from PIFs, we have a Codex, and then we have our own regional, our own different countries' food standards. How do we really, otherwise in the coming, if in the future we have so many food standards that we really need, and it's gonna make the regulators more confused, and especially the implementation and the enforcement. Yeah? The idea, the intention is clearly there, but it's just how we're gonna work this out and around. Thank you.
Even though I may have an answer actually to that, but given that your question was destined to our colleagues online, I'm going to turn to you, colleagues. And I don't know if you heard the question correctly, because I know she was far away, but you heard. So maybe I'll leave you the opportunity to answer that first, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we do.
Wonderful, and thank you very much for your question. It's a really, really important question, and I'm glad that you've raised it. It is certainly a question that is well founded in how standardization correlates with both national and regional regulation. This is definitely been in the center of the design of the TC3 PISC project. It is true that there are different national initiatives there have been for the leading Pacific Island nations. Not all of the Pacific Island nations have technical guidelines, legislations, regulatory schemes. The leading ones do have those, and the idea of a harmonized standardization is to make sure, in this particular case with TC3, is that we have representation from regulators from each of those countries that have those national programs and have been developing them for some time. The goal is definitely not to confuse things, but for the committee to take this regional committee, TC3, to take into account what exists in Fiji, in Tonga, and Samoa, and Vanuatu, and to make sure that when a common set of minimum performance indicators for the broader Pacific region is put in place, they don't contradict what may exist on a national level, but look for a common denominator that can be used for a platform for this committee to build over time. It is true that different nations do have those regulatory schemes in place. However, it is also true that in very critical areas, for example, description of nobility, they do differentiate quite a bit. And at the end of the day, the region as a whole is not able to fully maximize on its regional position as the Pacific Kava region really essentially, and to maximize on its full potential. There's been an extensive research that's been done that especially in the last few years, the entire supply chain of the Pacific region has changed quite dramatically. In fact, in some countries that cultivate and export kava, it gets imported from another Pacific Island nation. And so it is very, very critical that the region as a whole has a common set of principled performance indicators over time developed, so that that can start to be harmonized, which would then help support the growth for the region's Kava sector. But also regulators would also have a centralized sort of technical guidelines to look forward to and to adjust their respective regulatory settings to make sure that their resources are positioned in the most efficient and effective way as well. A regional solution will be significantly more advantageous to regulators as well. Just one final note I'm going to make here is just to put at ease some concerns, is that when a standard is produced, is published, the type of standards that TC3 will be working on, when published, that standard by default will be a voluntary industry standard. So it will not immediately turn into a mandatory standard. This would then allow national regulatory agencies to decide when is the right time for them to call up a standard as a means of compliance, or maybe postpone it until such time that they would like to call it up in their national provision. And some regulators may decide to call up a standard with modifications if it's something that they feel very strongly that needs to be modified for a particular country, or they can just call it up as an identically adopted standard. So the fact that a regional standard will be developed by Pacific Island Standards Committee doesn't mean that it will be a regulatory means of compliance on the day of its publication. It would be a sort of perhaps a regionally desired benchmark, which different countries will have their own approach as to when they would like to call it up as a regulatory means of compliance instrument. I'm just going to stop here. I hope that helps answer a little bit your question, but I'm happy to go into more detail.
Thank you for this answer. And I think actually it actually reiterates the status of all standards, including Codex standards. Standards that are developed by organizations, whether be it in the Pacific context or even by Codex, are essentially voluntary by nature unless decided upon by the regulatory authority as to how the standard would be used. I guess in this particular instance, we do have an opportunity in that there is an initial standard that was adopted in the context of Codex. And there is an acknowledgement that this standard requires updates, enhancements, particularly vis-a-vis the definition of nobility and how that is to be verified. So essentially from a compliance verification. And I would say it's very fortunate to see a complementary initiative that is taking place and that is doing the work really to generate the information needed and also to provide guidance, which once completed, and even actually during the course of its completion, can allow the level of interaction with what is happening at the Codex level in a manner that would allow the standard that is adopted at the Codex level to be potentially updated. So we're starting also from the premise that a Codex standard is not a static text. It is absolutely subject to any relevant updates on the basis of the scientific information that is made available. And I guess now going back to maybe building on the history that Scott presented, at the beginning, this progression is actually a very natural progression and I would say a desirable progression to see that an initial text developed by Codex with acknowledgement of challenges is finding an opportunity in an initiative that is being implemented in the same region offering some of the answers to technical questions that would supplement and improve the standard. So now, this is, by the way, not unheard of, particularly in the world of analytical methods. As you know, CCMAS methods tend to be methods that are developed by other parties, or that tend to be even approved by or have been endorsed by other standardization organizations, whether be it ISO or AOAC International or even IDF. You know, like it's basically those are. It's a common practice in the context of methods of analysis. In this case, it's actually not only the methods of analysis, but also even the definition of the parameters themselves, which can be further improved in the Codex text. So building on the discussion and actually on the history, I have even a suggestion for a path forward, which could appear as a natural one. I'm assuming that the initiative that is underway will lead to the development of reports and publications, and I don't know to what extent basically that is ready or will be ready, maybe having a reminder of the timelines associated with those, and to see essentially if those timelines and the deliverables that you expect to have could be married with the progress and the timelines of CCNASWP, of the Codex, of the Coordinating Committee for North America and the Southwest Pacific, in such a manner where we could suggest that a discussion paper could be brought by yourselves and maybe supported by some of the countries who were the proponent of the Kava standard, providing the updates on the work within the Pacific Initiative, and what could be considered as areas that could be referred to or uptaken into the Codex standard. So, and again, having references in the Codex standard is also something that we can have, particularly for methods of analysis. So, so this could be one of the suggestions of a progression of work, which is to maintain the linkage between the two streams of work, and to leverage certainly the efforts that you are kindly, offering to make us benefit from. So I'm just gonna put this suggestion up for comments, both from our colleagues from the Pacific Initiative as well as here in the room. So what I suggested basically is, while this initiative is developing and having the publications or progress reports being made available, the information stemming from this would be incorporated into a discussion paper that could be brought by some of the countries that are the proponent of. Fiji, I think, was leading the work on this particular initiative, but also with other countries as required, getting the information in collaboration with our colleagues and presenting an update. If the update is at a stage where we can offer already a proposed amendment to the text, that could be provided. If the update is a step towards what an amendment could be contemplated, it offers really the opportunity to maintain a close appreciation of the progress of the work up to the point where we would be ready to amend the Codex standard.
If I could make a comment, just a brief one, would absolutely be supportive and take today's example as certainly one of those commitments. Also, just to mention, the TC3 committee consists of 29 committee members. Less than half of those are participants as well as observers, but all of them participate. All of those are Pacific Island Forum technical experts, virtually every single one of them. And so the commitment is really for this homegrown solution for regional harmonization. And we've had long conversations with Scott, and many of those 29 committee members are, by the way, directly have been involved with the Codex work as well. And this is by design. The idea is that these are all relevant technical forums where different methods will be explored. The focus is on consensus, on regional consensus, openness and transparency. Certainly from a TC3 perspective, there will be the ongoing commitment for us to be working very closely, to be updating on progress, to provide opportunities at every sort of point of entry for our comments to be considered, because at the end of the day, these are all initiatives that are designed to benefit the region and Kava in particular. And so that would be the focus of TC3 as well.
Thanks, Sam. I just wanted to make one comment, just going back to the concerns that Tonga intimated about sort of the costs of certain methods and that kind of thing. I understand ALOC had mentioned that there is also kind of an implementation pilot, I think were the words, and so I believe, if I understand correctly, that there sort of is a future pipeline of support to be able to implement whatever this initiative produces, and so perhaps that support wouldn't just be for, I guess, producers, but also we could make sure that it supported regulators to have the right equipment and capability to be able to implement support.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
Yeah, thank you, Stan, for that response. And I believe what our work entails now towards this maintenance or regional standard will definitely complement with the initiative that TC3 Kava has in place, considering the timeline that we have to produce a document for the next city. Fiji is also proposing if we can share this work forward, meaning because we also want to test the robustness and the repeatability of this method. If you have one working on a particular region that would work with Fiji, and along with what Mr. Martin has just presented. But again, we will look at the criteria on this particular method and then take this forward and somehow will complement each other to test that it's really working well. Because I believe there's still a fine line between nobility and testing, because most literature, we need to test this against also our regional varieties on how best this method can handle whatever the metric is, whatever the year is, whatever the organ plan specifically on our Codex standard, and we will really come up with the data on those two capabilities. And I believe we can make this amended text once we work together and forward together.
Yeah. No. Thank you, Jeremiah. In fact, actually, this could be really the context of the discussion paper. The discussion paper can offer an update and can offer really a discussion of the connection of the findings, and the developmental efforts that are done within the Pacific Initiative, and essentially the requirements that you need to ensure the regional representation of whatever approach to be followed. So, colleague from Tonga.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think I'm supporting the idea of working together with the PQI, as I know that most of us here sitting here, we are also members of that committee. It's just the same people but different group. And also, I just want to ask, following my comments earlier on the emphasis of using UV spectroscopy. I also wonder, this is just out of curiosity, if the UV would be able to detect any alterations, like if there's any mixing of the two notebook, like the notebook varieties and the non-notebook varieties. I'm just looking from a food fraud perspective. I hope that makes sense.
If any of the colleagues can answer the question, I'm not a Kava specialist, so I would not be able to get that. So
you're asking if like a noble variety has been mixed with lesser varieties
Yes.
in the final product potentially.
Yes.
Yeah, if enough of it has been mixed in, the acetonic absorbance will pick it up. But if people are clever about it and know that it's going to be test for by acetonic absorbance, they can put in just enough to pass the test and still bulk out their product for the final product with a non-noble variety.
I guess
if
the
that
answer
answers
is
my
yeah.
question.
I guess the answer is yes, but it's not bulletproof. It depends on the amount, I guess.
So I guess I'm just putting it there just to consider that when that analysis is done on the food fraud side of it. Yeah.
Any other comments? Yes, our colleague, Elias.
Yes, the Codex standards when it's developed, what Professor said, it's volunteer standards that are available. And it will be, from time to time that it has to be upgraded. And I think the initiative that they are taking is also good. And because the standard that we have developed, it's there, and we have been asked by CCNASWP, to talk about the methods of analysis and sampling on how the Codex committee in the Pacific, North America, and Southwest Pacific has designed their test the lab analysis to come up with the standard. And I think that's one of the things that is still discussed. And I think what I could say is that so long as the initiative that is going to be made available in the Pacific initiative that is happening in Codex Australia, Standards Australia, and it can also be like appropriately. We are still trying. We are growing Kava, and most of our Kava is exported to our colleague in the Pacific, and so. So that most of the tests, the HPLC and other tests that are done by our colleague, especially in Fiji and the Tonga and Samoa. But I think from the presentation that I had, it's like some of the tests, like in Samoa, they said about they were able to identify, get some results out of those three results out of the test that they do for the Kava lactones. And so from the presentation, we see that there's more needs to be done. So I think my suggestion here is that if the initiative also will be able to look at upgrading the lab capacities in the Pacific, so that we will be able to be in a position to conduct those tests for some of the things, the tests that have not been conducted in the Pacific. So it will give us the headway in, like my colleague has said, there's a lot of varieties, like in Papua New Guinea we have so many varieties. Some are wild, and there are 2 or 3 known varieties that are available. And we had the first workshop last year. Thanks for Pacific Island Forum Secretary for helping us to have that workshop. So I think it's it's good for us to learn from what's happening out there in the Pacific initiative, so that it comes back to respected other countries like Samoa, Fiji, and Tonga, where they're already ahead of doing these tests and all that. Should be able to factor that into the available instruments that they have, the HPLC, so they can be able to conduct those other tests that is also not done in the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you, Elias. I think from what I'm hearing in general that there is general support for the approach forward. So in fact, again, I guess we can express really our thanks to all the efforts that are being deployed within the context of TC3. And in fact, I guess this maybe joins previous conversations we've had this morning about the complementarity of standardization efforts and how these standardization efforts, when they take place even within different contexts on the same topic, they're not seen as duplications, but they are in fact areas that we can leverage and that can result in the strength of the standards that are being developed or being sought after, particularly within the Codex context. So this is practically a great illustration of that. If there is no more questions of comments, I guess we're going to conclude with our thanks to all our colleagues from the Pacific Initiative for sharing their knowledge, experience, and their work plans, with actually a renewed call for a continued collaboration with the opportunity of getting the updates from your work and putting it as one of the agenda items to be discussed and to be tabled at CCNASWP 18, which has been already decided upon. It's going to be in February of 2027 in the Cook Islands. And I guess with Fiji being the member country who has been overseeing this area, perhaps I'm here suggesting that Fiji will take the lead in developing the discussion paper, supported by other members. So this is open to everybody, as inclusive as possible, but in collaboration with our colleagues from TC3, reporting on the updates and also offering some recommendations as to how the Codex standard could evolve in view of the findings and the developments of the standards coming from TC3.